Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Never Mind, We'll Do It Ourselves, the inside story of how a team of renegades broke rules, shattered barriers, and launched a drone warfare revolution. By Alec Bierbauer and Colonel Mark Cooter, USAF, retired, with Michael Marks. Narrated by David Vries. Preface. We set out to write our story as a first-hand narrative, presented in alternating chapters as seen at the time through the eyes of two participants. Even shoulder to shoulder on a shared mission, an Air Force guy and an agency guy can sometimes see the world very differently. In much the same way, the distinguished authors of our foreword, introduction, and afterword all speak about the accuracy of our story from their own unique first-hand vantage points spanning multiple perspectives. Charlie Allen served as the Assistant Director of Central Intelligence throughout the span of this narrative. With more than 4 decades of exceptional service at the CIA under 15 different directors, Charlie knew the organization, authorities, and personalities. Additionally, as chair of the National Intelligence Collection Board, his leadership, guidance, and blunt talk were critical to overcoming internal and external challenges. We could imagine no one better suited to comment on this book from the CIA's perspective. Air Force Lieutenant General John Soup Campbell was indispensable to the evolution of the Predator drone program. He provided vision, leadership, and crucial top cover to a team that lived on the frayed edge of the rule book. With the unique distinction of holding senior leadership positions within the USAF and CIA, General Campbell was both on the field and watching from the box seats at the same time. His perspective on the Predator program encompasses the strategic and the tactical. United States Air Force Staff Sergeant Gabe Brown, now a lieutenant colonel, entered this story facing unsurmountable odds on the top of a desolate mountain in Afghanistan, standing shoulder to shoulder with a valiant team of fellow Special Operations warriors. What happened on the windswept rocks of Takur Ghar was a testament to unbreakable American heroism and tenacity. It was our great honor to help support that band of brothers in its darkest moment. If anyone can speak of the Predator story straight from the foxhole, it's Gabe. Forward. Charlie Allen. 19 years ago, the world stood still on September 11, 2001. Islamic extremists had hijacked 4 United States civilian airliners filled with hundreds of innocent Americans and used them as weapons of mass destruction. Nearly 3,000 people, mostly Americans, died. As the Director of Central Intelligence for Collection at the Central Intelligence Agency, I felt nothing but abject failure on September 11, 2001, a failure that haunts me today. But I also felt another emotion, cold anger, and the determination to destroy those who perpetrated the attack, Osama bin Laden and his inner circle of al-Qaeda supporters, the evil terrorist organization that bin Laden headed. But I have intimate knowledge of one development that was tightly held in CIA and DoD on September 11, which gave me hope in hours of despair, an ungainly aircraft called the Predator. Never Mind, We'll Do It Ourselves is quite different from other books or articles written about the joint effort of CIA and the U.S. Air Force to radically change operations against al-Qaeda and bin Laden. It is not a story about senior policy and intelligence officials driving decisions and making courageous decisions about the employment of the Predator to change the collective dynamic against an evil terrorist organization. Rather, it is a vivid story of mid-level men and women of the intelligence community and the Department of Defense putting aside their personal career ambitions to bring together at the working level technology, science, and true grit to create a revolution in warfighting. It is the story of how over a dozen intelligence and military organizations engaged in constant collaboration at the program management level to overcome entrenched bureaucracies and the not here syndrome prevalent among certain agencies. The stellar effort was unprecedented, Many of the heroes here were GS-9s and 11s, O-3s and 4s, and E-5 non-commissioned officers. The leading protagonist in this effort was an officer named Alec Bierbauer, a former Army warrant officer associated with intelligence support to special operations. Alec was always like magic, appearing when you urgently needed advice and ideas on how to bring justice to Al-Qaeda. When he showed up at my office at CIA headquarters in early February 2000, he seemed to know that I was responding to an urgent request from Special Assistant to the President for Counterterrorism, Richard Dick Clark. Clark, hard-driving, impatient, and often short on diplomacy, had sent me a memorandum giving me 30 days to come up with new, innovative ideas for locating bin Laden. It was a typical Clark memo, brusque and to the point. I told Alec that I had prepared a list of technical operations that, if implemented, would help achieve Clark's objective. I told him that I had appointments to see the J-3 and J-39 in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, namely Vice Admiral Scott Fry and Brigadier General USAF Scott Gration, respectively. Alec immediately launched into a long, passionate briefing on how the Predator could be used to change the collection dynamic against Al-Qaeda, and urged it be given top priority in my report to Clark. When I got to the Pentagon, I was royally received by Admiral Fry and General Gration. Both raised the topic of using the Predator against bin Laden, and the spiel was the same as that given by Alec. Why keep submarines in the basket off Pakistan if a few Predators could be seconded with U.S. Air Force crews to CIA to be operated under CIA's special authorities? Gration, in particular, stated that 2 or 3 Predators located at Indian Springs, Nevada, could be loaned to CIA to change the collection dynamic. Admiral Fry stated that he was frustrated with the agency's current lack of access, and noted that Tomahawk land attack missiles, or TLAMs, would fly from the submarines off the coast of Pakistan if we obtained solid evidence of bin Laden's precise location. The TLAMs would destroy bin Laden and Al-Qaeda's central core. I drove back to Langley knowing that employing the Predator would be by far atop the list of the report I would send to Clark. Major policy decisions were made, at times haltingly and with lawyers occasionally throwing a wrench in the works, in the spring and summer. From the first flight I knew Alec had been right. The collection dynamic had truly changed. The United States had key Al-Qaeda leaders under surveillance, and they were completely unaware of Predator's presence. Colonel Mark Cooter is the second protagonist in this story. An Air Force major at the time, Cooter is a brash, irreverent officer, now retired, who bleeds blue, but is an absolutely dedicated officer who had had significant Predator experience beginning in Bosnia. As the operations officer for the team, he was a strong advocate of arming the Predator. In early 2001, tests were conducted by the Air Force and CIA at sites in the western United States. These tests demonstrated the Predator had lethal capabilities, but explicit rules of engagement were missing. As if by magic again, Lieutenant General John Campbell, an Air Force F-15 Eagle pilot, showed up as the Associate Director of Central Intelligence for Military Support. He helped develop strict rules in the use of the Predator's lethal capabilities. He not only did this with aplomb, but also worked to improve relations between the Air Force and CIA on all aspects of the Predator program. In addition, he recognized the value of supporting the mid-level Air Force and CIA officers who were operationally bringing the Predator project together. In the opening chapter, entitled First Blood, Colonel Cooter captures vividly the first day, October 7, 2001, the date the U.S. attacked in response to 9/11 to take down the Taliban and to kill bin Laden and Al-Qaeda's leaders. The Predator, guided by an Air Force pilot 7,000 miles away, was tracking the movement of Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, whose motorcade had stopped at unfamiliar compounds inside Kandahar. Cooter's description of the ground control station and the Global Response Center is captured literally moment by moment. As Cooter puts it, It was the first shot of a revolution that truly would be heard around the world. The face of aerial warfare had just changed forever. Not only was the Predator key to pinpointing the enemy in difficult terrain, but also it helped to guide a number of U.S. strike aircraft into close-quarters combat, ensuring the enemy was attacked, not U.S. SEALs and Rangers. Never mind, we'll do it ourselves should appeal to a wide audience, not just those involved in military, intelligence, or national security generally, but also average Americans concerned by the nation's security in a world of increasing threat. Every listener should be buoyed by the intensity of this book, the absolute patriotism, dedication, and zeal of Alec, Cooter, and others. For example, the authors praise the unfailing support they received from Cofer Black, the charismatic leader of the Counterterrorism Center, and Rich Blee, a deputy, both CIA officers, of the highest integrity and of operational skill. Also acknowledged by the authors is Diane Killip, a now retired officer of the clandestine service, whose knowledge of al-Qaeda's leaders and its network seemed unlimited. Charlie Allen, Assistant Director of Central Intelligence, 1998 to 2005. Introduction. Lieutenant General John Campbell, USAF, retired. Despite a string of attacks attributed to al-Qaeda, or AQ, dating back to the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993, the attacks on U.S. embassies in 1998, and the attack on the USS Cole in 2000, AQ and Osama bin Laden, or UBL, weren't on many front burners prior to 9/11. However, at senior levels in the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Council, the system was flashing red, and small pockets of individuals inside the highly classified world of the intelligence community were focused on what soon became the nation's #1 problem set. Never mind, we'll do it ourselves chronicles the efforts of a group of these folks charged in early 2000 with leveraging new capabilities to gain actionable intelligence on UBL and AQ. Their success, with a small, gangly, unarmed predator in finding and identifying one of the most sought-after individuals in the world, showed the power of technology, fusion of the intelligence collection disciplines, or INTs, and the imagination of people who understood the capabilities of this tool. It also highlighted the hard political and military decisions presented by UBL and the al-Qaeda network in the days before 9/11. The realization we had UBL in our sights, though, had the effect of spurring action to prepare for the next time. In retrospect, the achievement was a combination of opportunity, operational need, and leadership in key places in the Central Intelligence Agency, Air Force, and National Security Council. This dramatic demonstration of the capabilities of the Predator platform generated the development of one of the most powerful weapons on the war on terrorists. The armed Predator was born and grew up in a highly classified world. Parts of the story have been told in various places, congressional testimony, books and articles, and in the media, and the outline is generally well known. Most of these accounts are at the 50,000-foot level, big-picture descriptions of the system and the way it has been used as a tool to target some of the worst bad guys who would do us harm. This manuscript is at the opposite end of the spectrum, a detailed and highly personal account from the working-level CIA and Air Force officers, technicians, engineers, and operators who designed, developed, tested, deployed, and flew the system. Starting in late 2000 with top cover and encouragement from a few fortunately placed leaders who understood the threat, these men and women tackled myriad technical and operational problems, and by September 4, 2001, were prepared to deploy and employ the system. The hurdles that remained, thorny bureaucratic and legal issues that bedeviled the program, all vanished on September 11, and the Predator soon proved its worth. I was privileged to be assigned from 2000 to 2003 to the CIA as the Associate Director of Central Intelligence for Military Support, basically the senior military officer at CIA, charged with coordinating the support provided by CIA to DoD and vice versa. Since Desert Storm, both sides have seen the wisdom of providing an intermediary to bridge the culture gap that has existed since the days of Wild Bill Donovan. As a career fighter pilot, I was surprised to find myself in this position. But it gave me a bird's-eye view of the events described in this narrative and an appreciation for the initiative of young officers who had a mission, a vision, top cover, and a lot of running room. It confirmed my opinion that organizational affiliation matters less than mission focus, and I was proud to help when I could. The backstory of how this manuscript came to be is a tale of its own. Aside from congressional testimony, almost none of the publicly available Predator accounts ever went through a formal security review, and people who were involved in the program have been understandably reluctant to comment or contribute. The authors of this document were cognizant of their lifetime professional obligations as cleared individuals and were determined to work through the security review process. Despite the fact that the story and the technology were well known and are almost 20 years old, to say that the initial review did not go well would be an understatement. Only the determination of the authors to document their piece of history in a way that would stand the test of time and some pro bono legal help led to success. It's interesting that at 39 months, the security review process took 3 times as long as the entire Armed Predator Development Program, from the first UBL sighting in September 2000 to first employment in October 2001. We often are fascinated by technology, but what I have come to believe is that it's all about people. Alec, Mark, Eddie, Charlie, Snake, Gunny, Ginger, Joker, John, Boom Boom, the man with 2 brains, and the other characters who populate this story are all patriots who have kept us safe at night. They never asked for credit, but the fact that we've not had another attack on America since 9/11 is testimony to their efforts, and it's good to see them acknowledged. Lieutenant General John Campbell, USAF, retired, Associate Director of Central Intelligence for Military Support, 2000 to 2003. 1. First Blood. Mark Cooter. Then It Shall Be War. October 7, 2001. The first JDAM slammed into the runway at 9 in the evening Afghan time. I'll spare you the physics lesson. Let's just say that when a steel pipe filled with 2,000 pounds of high explosive plows into tarmac at 600 miles an hour, you get one hell of a big hole. In the ghostly gray world of thermal imaging, a ragged line of jet-black starbursts swept up the runways of Kandahar's military airfield. Pinpoint shots cratered taxiways and runway intersections in a single pass. The radar site that controlled the area's air and air defense units was now a smoking hole in the background. This was critical. A MiG fighter can be a dangerous opponent if it gets into the air. Our opening move was to win all the dogfights before they got started. As an Air Force intelligence officer, I saw the video on the monitor as the money shot. The Air Force had long dreamed of real-time bomb damage assessments, and this was as real-time as you could get. It didn't come without effort. I cajoled Alec Bierbauer, my CIA counterpart, to briefly come off our current tasking to get the shot. Our pilot, Captain Stephen Joker Jones, had maneuvered the aircraft to get the best angle. The SOs, Sensor Operators Staff Sergeant Andy R., Senior Airman Chris B., and Technical Sergeant Steve H., worked together to get the sensor into the perfect location. Captain Ginger Wallace and our operations team fed us minute-by-minute updates on the air war. That's teamwork to perfection. The Air Force had come a long way from the days of carpet-bombing a target in the hope of hitting something vital. Unlike the dumb iron bombs of World War II that rained from the sky like bricks, JDAMs were GPS-guided, able to home in on a precise coordinate. In just over a minute, a handful of FA-18 Hornets transformed 10,000 feet of military-grade runway into little more than a potholed stretch of old road. That magic trick might sound like a big deal to the layman, but it was nothing new to the way America wages an air war. The JDAM had been around since 1993, when the USAF 46th Test Wing led a team of engineers at Eglin Air Force Base to bolt a guidance kit on a Rockwell GBU-15 munition. By 1997, JDAMs were in service, demonstrating a 95% hit ratio inside a 10-meter circle. Although it carried a price tag of less than $30,000 apiece, JDAM delivered precision targeting on par with $1 million TLAM cruise missile. That's a lot of bang for the buck. What was new this night was that an Air Force major could sit in Virginia, half a world away from Afghanistan, and watch those bombs strike home. I could do so through the eyes of an airplane that had no one on board, which was unheard of. Less than a month had passed since the horrific attacks of 9/11, just long enough for the initial numbing shock to give way to thoughts of national security and, to exacting a measure of payback. The center point of that mission was Osama bin Laden, who was only now becoming a household name across America. But the mission to dismantle the world's most dangerous terrorist network was not limited to eradicating one man, no matter how important that guy might be. Tonight's part in that effort was focused on one Mullah Mohammed Omar. The CIA had classified Omar as an HVT, a high-value target, which in simple terms meant that he was one extremely bad character. Omar was Osama bin Laden's de facto right hand, the spiritual leader and supreme commander of the Taliban. In Afghan terms, Omar was iconic. A tall, strong mujahideen who had distinguished himself as a crack marksman with anti-tank rockets by destroying several Soviet armored vehicles in the 1980s. He was tough as nails, having survived numerous wounds that included the loss of his right eye to shrapnel. Omar was also a Muslim extremist who had earlier that year demonstrated the depths of his fanaticism by attacking the Buddhas of Bamiyan, towering statues carved into a cliffside way back in the 6th century. Incredible examples of ancient Gandhara art, the Buddhas stood in silent vigil for over 14 centuries, surviving a line of onslaughts that dated back to Genghis Khan. Sadly, that long chapter in history ended abruptly when Omar declared one of Afghanistan's oldest national treasures to be idols that offended Islam. Then he had them blown into rubble. In an interview shortly after 9/11, Omar announced his new goal, the extinction of America. You can see why he sat atop America's hit list. While bin Laden traveled widely, Omar rarely strayed from the familiar ground of Kandahar. And unlike the elusive bin Laden, who had seemingly vanished into thin air, we had a pretty good idea where to find Omar. Clandestine source reporting had placed him in a triangular compound called Baba Sahib, a mere 13 miles from the airfield. The sprawling compound had been built in 1996 with some of the funding reportedly coming from the deep pockets of bin Laden himself. Now Hollywood would have you believe that cutting-edge intelligence ops all take place in gleaming James Bond command centers lined wall-to-wall with computer screens and lots of chrome. Reality is a bit less impressive. The vital mission of ridding the world of Omar had brought my team to a lowly mobile home, complete with porta-potty and a flock of pink plastic flamingos dumped in a parking lot in northern Virginia. From that improbable location, we were expected to drop the hammer on an enemy some 7,000 miles away. Beyond the linear distance separating these points, the locations themselves might well have been on different planets. Virginia boasts rolling hills of lush woodlands that had already begun to shift from green to the golden hues of autumn. Kandahar, on the other hand, looked more like a bleached-out version of Mars, an endless tabletop of khaki-colored sand and dry scrub, broken only by random ridgelines of jagged gray stone. But if the distance and disparity were not challenge enough, our mission carried one additional wrinkle. We were to fight a war not with boots on the ground, but through the unblinking eye of a gangly, prop-driven, unmanned aircraft. It is difficult to fully convey the oddity of this bird. Everything about it seemed backward, starting with the propeller back on its tail. In an age of sleek, shark-like jets, this was, by all appearances, the bastard child of a sailplane and a remote-controlled toy. To appreciate its absurdity as a weapon of war, one need only compare it with a mainstay of Air Force power, the F-15 Strike Eagle. The latter has an impressive pair of turbofan jet engines that can push plane and pilot, along with over 11 tons of external fuel and ordnance, through the battle space at a blistering maximum speed of 1,900 miles per hour. In layman's terms, that's akin to a 22-foot box truck stuffed to the gills cranking along at 2.5 times the speed of sound. By comparison, if we hung just 300 pounds on our bird and stomped the pedal to the metal, its tiny motor would struggle to hit 90 miles per hour. It was a John Deere tractor on a racetrack filled with Corvettes, and according to conventional wisdom, one would have been hard-pressed to imagine a contraption less suited for the modern battlefield. As limited as it was in many ways, the bird that circled in the night sky over Omar's house had already evolved considerably from its even more awkward childhood in Bosnia and Kosovo. Admittedly, it was still loud as hell when you were close to it, garnering the uncharitable moniker the flying lawnmower. And although it would never win a race to a given location, it could do things a jet couldn't dream of once on target. When a jet streaks overhead at Mach or more, the pilot is lucky to catch a brief, blurry glimpse at the ground beneath. With its ponderous speed and incredible hang time over a target, our lawnmower gave us box seats with tons of time to loiter and watch. Painted air superiority gray to blend in with the daytime sky, our plane was equipped with $1 million camera package, along with equally sophisticated communications gear that allowed us to eavesdrop on bad guys and talk to our own forces. But the real miracle was that we were doing all this while seated in the United States, thousands of miles away from the battle space. The technology behind that breakthrough arose from a short paper written by Albert, Big Safari's resident mad scientist, who was reverently known in our community as the man with 2 brains. The final piece of evolution wasn't buried inside the aircraft, but hanging underneath. Beyond the all-seeing camera pod and globe-spanning control systems, this aircraft carried Hellfire missiles. Over most of the last 2 decades, the laser-guided AGM-114 Hellfire had proven itself to be one of the best tank killers in the U.S. arsenal. The brainchild of Lockheed Martin, Hellfire had a history of success that stretched from Panama to Iraq. And we had a pair of them. Breaking the mold of every surveillance drone that had come before it, our bird had not come to simply watch the war, but to wage it. We were about to find out if this hybrid creature could live up to its name, Predator. I peeled my gaze off the monitor and took a moment to scan the room. The GCS, or ground control station, was alive with activity. To all outward appearance, a humble 20-foot intermodal shipping container, the GCS was crammed full of technology. The windowless steel box housed the hands-on functions of flight operations, the pilot, sensor operator, and mission commander. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker flew into battle with the ever-versatile R2-D2 in the trunk to lend a timely hand in the midst of crisis. In the real world, our lifeline was the double-wide, a mobile home parked next to the GCS, filled with the best air and air defense analysts and Afghanistan experts in the world. Technically dubbed the Operations Cell in formal briefings, the double-wide served functions that ranged from mission planning and analysis to coordination with military elements in the battle space. To do so, it was populated with an arsenal of weather forecasters, intelligence analysts, targeters, imagery analysts, and planners. As it turned out, you need a whole lot of people to fly an unmanned aircraft. Over and around these experts, the interior of the double-wide was crammed with numerous classified computers, networked together into a very...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?